The idea that it's weird and strange, I don't really buy actually, given modern life. I don't think it's that weird.
Dave has spent years traveling the UK filming over 100 different folk customs and distilled that immense archive into a unique documentary series that completely strips away the presenter or narrator, letting the custodians or the traditions speak for themselves. And the series covers 6 particular events or traditions, from the Buryman, Rush Bearing, Horn Dance, Jethod Handbar, Bonfire, and the Haxy Hood.
Hello and welcome to Wyrd Wessex. I'm Andy.
And I'm Craig. And today we have the honour to welcome filmmaker Dave Brewis to the show. Now, Dave's work is precisely kind of what we're all about, really, here on Wyrd Wessex, kind of holding up a mirror to the enduring, extraordinary traditions of the British Isles.
Yeah, and Dave spent years documenting living folklore, but his latest documentary series, Gatherings, takes a unique, unmediated approach that avoids sort of the terms of weird and eccentric and things like that, the stuff that those labels that mainstream media often use.
So yeah, welcome to the show, Dave.
Hello, Craig. Hello, Andy. Thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to our chat.
We are too. Thank you very much. So for listeners who haven't yet discovered your work, could you give us your sort of elevator pitch? What is it that you would say in your own words that you do?
Well, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I have a production services company as well, make all sorts of video for all sorts of reasons. But in terms of originating content, if you like, folklore is my thing. So thanks for the intro, by the way. I think that was quite an accurate description of where I'm coming from, actually.
So it's good.
We are available to hire.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually a big fan of observational documentary, meaning not presenter-led, show, not tell, if you like. It's not very in vogue in this attention economy in which we live, where everyone's shouting down the barrel of a lens, but I still feel as if it should have a place within audiovisual language, really. So I think that for this subject matter, folklore and living traditions specifically, bearing in mind I'm more interested in the sort of real, what I'd call living folklore, so real people coming together for specific reasons, as opposed to perhaps the stories, myths and legends aspects. I think that the observational approach is ideal. So as you said in your intro, this is a place for the custodians, actually, and not the commentators. No presenter, no voiceover, just everything in the words of the participants and the people who keep these traditions alive.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting, just so as you're talking there, I was just thinking it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because then you're giving the people whose events it is, because they're not your events. So you're letting people speak for themselves rather than putting words into their mouths.
Which is really important, especially if you look back how this has been treated in the media ever since the birth of the early 20th century. Really, Pathé newsreels used to treat this bit as the off bit at the end of the news, and treat it with sort of not disdain so much, but certainly a bit patronizing, And now these flowery hatted men will now run around this field in Lincolnshire, for example, and it's all a bit throwaway. And then in the sort of magazine style shows and news media that I grew up with, the sort of like in the 90s and earlier, it was definitely the feel good bit at the end of the news, And after all of the drudgery of war and politics and all the rest of it, and that's okay in a way, in that it's at least it gets covered, but it's way more interesting than that, with really deep inherent themes, So the idea that it's weird and strange, I don't really buy, actually, given modern life. I don't think it's that weird when people communities come together and keep their traditions alive. They're not doing it necessarily for traditional reasons as much as they are doing it because the next one's around the corner and it's really fun and everyone enjoys it, right? That's how these things perpetuate, self procreate, if you like. So I guess that's where I'm coming from. I want to give them the platform and not the commentators.
That's
Yeah.
that's interesting. I think we're gonna have to rename our podcast to Perfectly Normal Wessex. But I get completely what you mean. I get completely what you mean there. And yeah, I think it's a good way to look at it. These are living traditions. They're not, sort of, it's not some archaic thing that people have decided to, dredge up. It's something that's continuous and evolving, which we're going to touch on later. But you've dedicated years to documenting these sort of cultural events, customs and traditions. When was it in your life that you first became sort of this interested in the idea? Like, what was the initial spark that led you down that path?
Yeah, by accident, actually. So I was living in Paris actually, and I was running my TV production services company out of there from 2001. And in 2005, an American broadcaster contacted me and said, have you guys got any offbeat content? Because they had this magazine style program, and they wanted some stuff out of like old Europe. And initially, I was like, well. Sort of half turned them down really, and then I started looking at it and realized that there's quite a lot of like wacky stuff out there which is designed to be crazy, everything from like bog snorkeling to world wife carrying championships to stone skimming to I don't know conkers, Bognor Birdman back in the day, the World Hen Racing Championships. There's a whole stack of these things in the UK anyway, which sprang up in the 80s, and on top of that, of course, there's stuff which as we've mentioned, mainstream media tends to treat as like weird and strange, which is more the folkloric stuff. And so I think going into it, I kind of knew that there was sort of two categories here. I thought the Americans might lump it all together, when in fact the Brits do lump it all together as well. Um, but over time, over covering this stuff, mainly at weekends over 6 or 7 years and traveling quite a bit, it just became more and more obvious to me that um, I was getting really drawn into the subject matter, and I was getting less formulaic about how I covered it, and I was like getting really interested. So I made two 6 times 30 minute television series in between 2009 and 2012. One is about France and one is about Britain, and the one that was about Britain was treated in quite an eccentric kind of way, really, reportage after reportage. And there was a version in French which did really well in France. They just loved to see how eccentric the Brits were. And really interestingly, actually, they've got a load of admiration for it, right? Because it was about the Brits not taking themselves too seriously. I call the series So British, which is, I know it's English, but it's actually a term they use to describe, our sense of irony and doing stuff which is daft just for the sake of daft. They call it deuxième degré in French, and it is quite peculiarly, it's quite particular to the British Isles when we don't take ourselves too seriously. I think possibly in the last decade or so we've started to take ourselves too seriously, and
Yeah. Do you know, it's interesting. As a podcast, we got accused once, and we invited someone on the show that declined. But apparently they told us we don't take ourselves seriously enough for anyone to take us seriously with what we do.
Yeah.
Like, we have to be genuine to ourselves, right? And be ourselves. It's a podcast. So like,
yeah,
they
we're
need
not making
personality too, don't they? But
yeah, no, I like what you guys do. You've got to be yourself. I think that's the key.
yeah.
And ultimately, but it's I don't think any other nation would have created like these world championships, which are world egg trebuchet championships. I mean, it's not gonna And the fact it wasn't just five or six of them. You know that there's like maybe 40 or 50 world nettle eating championships, the world
Yeah,
chainsaw carving championships. It's always the world championships, right? You know, Britain has to be the leader of in that respect. But
yeah,
you know, it's packaged in a sense of irony, I think, and I think that is quite British actually. But I think actually, personal opinion, I think we've lost our ability a bit collectively to take ourselves, I think we're
yeah.
starting to take ourselves a bit too seriously, and obviously there's a bit of a national conversation going on right now, and it to my mind, it's like really,
Mm.
um, so.
Yeah, I
Well, we're
think
happy to lead the forefront of the people that don't take themselves seriously anymore. Like,
remind ourselves that we are the nation that gave the world Monty Python. You know, it's
mm,
Well, it's a good point. It's a good point, Andy. I mean, Monty Python was massive in France,
yeah,
massive, and so
mm,
was Benny Hill. So was Ben. I know it's not as funny, but it is in the same way that it's I know it's titillating and all of that, but it's back end very very passe in terms of its like um, sort of culture, but it's anything that's like daft. It's designed to be daft,
yeah,
mm,
because to find another nation that does that, think about it. There's not that many. I mean, I
mm,
love French culture. My kids are half French. I'm fluent in French. I spent 14 years living there. It's got all sorts of things going for it. But I think the one thing that the Brits have got is that we've when we relax a little bit is we don't take ourselves too seriously.
mm.
And it
Some
all
of the
sorry, go on.
no, no, you go on.
I was just
Carry on.
all that to say, there's all of these events which are designed to be daft, which all
Yeah.
actually sprang up in the 1980s, and then way more interestingly, in terms of inherent theme, community, continuity, sense of place. Uh,
Mm,
some of these more ancient games and annual rituals
yeah,
are of a sort of a different category entirely. So that's what gatherings is really. It's going back to that stuff and exploring those themes, but inherently, not explicitly. So and I think most a few I'm interested to see what you guys think, but a lot of people who've watched all six back to back immediately start seeing the themes, regardless of
mm,
whether it's Jedburgh or Sawbury Bridge in West Yorkshire, or whether it's Haxy in Lincolnshire or Rye in Sussex. What the common denominator, if you like, is that sense of place and that sense of fine over our dead bodies will it die, but there's also this element of sort of rich community and tradition, I guess, but
mm,
which exists.
yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say that is the overall thing I took away from it. I guess was that community aspect of it, and they all seem so. There is a sense of duty there, but also the happiness to be part of that, And I think that especially sort of in the first episode where they're recalling like previous Berrymans so fondly, for example, it's really lovely to see. Um, it's
mm,
funny. Just side note, I got the I watched the first episode, and then I hadn't bought the rest of the series yet, and so when I knew you were coming on, I thought, well, I better hurry up and watch the rest. And I haven't actually properly seen the last two because I got my girlfriend to watch it with me because I was like, I need to watch this, so that's what we're doing tonight. And she was like, can you wait until I'm back? She really got into it, so well done on that. Um,
Oh, good, yeah, yeah. Oh well,
mm,
certainly that. I mean, personally, shouldn't say this, but I think from a filmmaking perspective, the sixth and final one around Haxy Hood is possibly the strongest film. Actually, I mean, again, it's one of three where I use archives that go back to the 1970s, And so what I'm trying to do there really is root the audience in a sense of place, but shift them through time. And you know, luckily from a, I guess from again from a filmmaking perspective, we live at a time where the aesthetics associated with each of the tape formats immediately date the footage. Do they not? You know, VHS is clearly
Yeah.
80s, mini DV is starting to look flat and no depth, and 90s and moving into sort of HD, which is all the stuff I shot between 6 and 12, and then you get to 4K, which is the contemporary stuff, which is full screen. So what we did, myself and Dave Scott, and who helped me edit the films, is that we treated the archives very definitely as archives, and we didn't pretend that there were anything other than that. So that we, via the sort of show don't tell piece, we could just shift people through time without being having to explain it, which is back to that, I guess, observational documentary, using that as a device as opposed to and I just feel like that's very different to what usually goes on in presenter-led documentaries, where everything has to be explained and everything's about the individual that's holding the hand of the audience. I'm not a fan, really. I think audiences are intelligent enough to make their own minds up, coming in and going out of the films. Again, that's the approach.
Yeah, I was waiting for the bit where you're walking along a random field gesticulating a lot while explaining it. It's you know. Um, but yeah, the side note to that is the scary thing is that I was looking at something and thinking, oh, that looks like it's from like the early 2000s. Yeah, in my brain, that's still just the other day. But I'm like, no, that is
It was.
I just wanted to ask as well, the events you cover, sort of, they range from well known to like the very beautifully obscure. Your latest series covered sort of 6 customs across the UK, having filmed over 100 events since 2006. What made you choose these particular 6 for the Gathering series?
Ooh, we'd have to sort of take them individually, but well, I mean, obviously, Abbott's Bromley horn dance is England's oldest traditional dance. It's regarded as that. It's the poster child, if you like, of sort of traditional
Yeah.
annual sort of events. And I'd filmed it a whole bunch of times before, and I thought that was a bit of a no-brainer, really. Haxy Hood was like first on the team sheet, I think, simply because I filmed the majority of the sort of mass participation games. That's how I call them, not mob football, because it's not really necessarily around mob football. But I've been to, Orkney and Ashbourne and Workington and the border games and the like. Haxy's got that, but it's got an extra layer of folklore around it. And the fact that it's a community which was isolated for such a long period of time, it makes it quite interesting in terms of its endurance, if you like, as an event. So that was definitely straight in.
Do you know, kind of, yeah, while you're mentioning that one, I found particularly Haxy Hood, it reminded me of Ethiopian stick fighting. Have you seen that?
Just images of it, yeah.
Yeah, like Bruce Parry's series Tribe years ago, he went along to one, and it's got more violence to it too. The Handbar or Haxy Hood, but I don't know. There was something about the communities coming together and partaking in this event that just kind of put me in mind of that kind of thing, which, I don't know, found that interesting.
Well, I don't know. Again, you look at the sort of inherent themes. I'm sure that I've never covered Ethiopian stick fighting, but I'll assume that these things are true. That there'll be a community around it. It's probably on a particular date. It might be annual. It's fun. And it goes back, and probably the older generation are like, this is how we do it, and the younger generation, the ones with the energy and enthusiasm, will think it's pretty normal, right? Because they probably grew up with it from an early age.
Yeah.
So in that respect, you'll be bang on. So that I'm
Mm.
guessing, of course, but that tends to be the case for all of these games. You know, the sort of ancient, not ancient, the wrong word really, but the older
Yeah,
games.
yeah.
I Yeah, it's just on that point. I in my day job, I sort of run historical workshops for mostly for primary school children, and
Right.
one of the things we do is play Cub with them, which is a Scandinavian game which dates back to the 1800s. When we're teaching them Vikings, and it's like a historical games thing. And what I always say to them is, well, this isn't a game that the Vikings necessarily played. Pretty much every culture across the world has had a game where you throw sticks at other sticks, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of that goes true for a lot of these traditions as well,
Mm.
across the world when you see those similarities. Sometimes it might be influences coming over, like the potential for Morris dancing, but sometimes it is just, it's an obvious thing to do, you know?
Yeah, of course it is, and I mean, for someone, I'm in my 50s now, and I remember that sort of late 70s power cuts, and obviously pre-internet and pre-ZX Spectrum days, right? So sticks actually definitely formed part of our toy base, I mean, yeah, and that's what's yeah, you do wonder, don't you, where that goes when I mean, obviously you're working with kids, how what does normal look like to them? So for instance, episode one, the Bury Man,
Mm.
2-year-olds come out onto the streets, dragged usually by their mums, just to watch and be scared of the Bury Man who's walking through these streets. For your audience, he's encased in burrs from top to bottom. He has a flowery hat, two standard bearers on both sides, and he's drinking whiskey all day. There is a sort of element of sort of sacrifice around it. So
Yeah.
that 2-year-old, grows up thinking that's pretty normal, right? 20, 30 years later, that person might have a child and drag their 2-year-old back onto the street for another normalization. This is how these things work. So I think wherever there's
Mm.
an annual ritual which is built in a community which is intergenerational, and in the Buryman you've got people from 2 years old to 92 years old on the streets, then I think they've got much better chance of sort of self-perpetuating, because everybody wants
Mm.
them to continue. Yeah.
I think I waylaid you a little bit because you're a little bit in the middle of explaining why you picked the six, and then I kind of went off on stick
Yeah.
fighting. So, yeah, you got up to talking about the Haxy, I think.
Yeah. Um, I always fancied Rush Bearing and Sawbury Bridge because I'd seen some images, and despite that one being a revival, was brought back in 1977, didn't have perhaps the endurance of the others. I just thought where it is, it's up in the upper Calder Valley. It's quite a spectacular sort of place. It's a very atmospheric place up there. I don't know if you guys have been, but
No.
there's something incongruous about the sort of I guess it's the sort of dark satanic mills, that's that area of Britain with this beautiful countryside, in these fantastic valleys, um, sort of blackened buildings, and I shot it over 2 days, and it had perfect sunlight as well. So I got really lucky with the weather. It's essentially a reenactment of a ritual which used to happen annually, which was about putting rushes onto the floors of churches when those floors would have not been stone, even they would have just been earth. Typically
Yeah.
happened around harvest time, so people would be able to go into churches and have a place to worship during the winter months with a sort of warmer floor, I guess. But in 1977, it was reenacted, and today it's just really spectacular. So you've got these like suited and booted cart pullers, white shirts, straw hats, Lancashire clogs, obviously. Well, it's based in West Yorkshire, but they're still clogs, Lancashire clogs, and pulling this huge rush cart, which is very decorated and has a maiden, a cart maiden sat on top, and then behind, obviously,
Mm.
there's the brakemen, because of as the whole thing's dragged from pub to pub, from church to church across the valley for 2 days. There's quite a lot of inclines, so there's an element of danger and jeopardy there as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I just wanted to cover that one because I'd never covered it before. So I actually shot that one slightly differently because I didn't have any archives. So I thought I'll just do more fly on the wall, So
Yeah.
I turned up 2 weeks in advance in expectation that, something might go wrong, which is how factual entertainment very often works. Nothing went wrong. It was just amazingly organized. It's probably the
Mm.
model for, like, road closures, dealing with councils, health and safety in Britain today, because that is a challenge for many of these events. Um,
Mm.
and I've gone off topic again, Craig. Oh, I can't remember exactly where I was there, but that was
You
Rush
were
Bearing.
telling us why you picked those particular six. Yeah. So I think you've done all but two. What is my list of all
Yeah.
of the episodes?
Oh, well,
So you've mentioned, yeah,
Bonfire,
Bonfire.
episode 5, yeah. So Sussex is the home of Bonfire, really, and November celebrations. Um, as your audience will know, it's this time of year, isn't it? There was a 1606 actually proclamation after the 1605 failure of the gunpowder plot for to go and was actually law. You had to go to church, and there was a sort of mandate to rejoice in the streets, and folk lit bonfires and celebrated the demise of Guy Fawkes. And but modern bonfire today is really thriving still in Sussex. You've got many bonfire societies, and they take it pretty seriously. And that the
Yeah.
one, Lewis is obviously the capital, really, but there's 5 or 6 bonfire societies in Lewis, and it just felt a bit big for the series, because I was trying to get closer and obviously film these things from
I
inside
guess
the
you
community.
lose that kind of community element if you go with the bigger
Yeah.
events.
Yeah, and a lot of the societies come to Lewis, obviously, as well, because
Mm.
it's the capital of the event, and the actual action is quite distributed across the town. And it's also been covered a lot. Rye, of course, further, it has got an extra layer of folklore because it burns its boats. I was quite intrigued by that, and I started looking at the place itself, and it was just a wonderful backdrop to make a documentary film as well. So I thought I'd cover that one. It's more family orientated, that one, and
Yeah.
and they've got less. There's less barriers and there's less health and safety, and therefore it looks better in respect. There's less bollards and stuff.
Yeah.
They work hard to retain the look and feel of it. So I thought that
Because
was
that is another element. I know you mentioned before about kind of the health and safety and the preparation. And I think that's why a lot of places don't have bonfires anymore. You get fireworks displays, but the kind of the fires themselves have died out, I think, mainly down to health and safety.
I know. And I know, and it's a shame. I think
Yeah.
I'm not a staunch traditionalist, but at the same time, it's like, they're fun, right? There's something about
Yeah.
Mm.
fire, which is, which is
Yeah.
I
There is.
uh,
I went to my girlfriend is from Catalonia, a village a town called Sabadell, and every year, sort of beginning of September, they have this big festival, sort of this big cultural festival, lots of street parades, lots of food. Um, Everyone wears. I don't want to take it down because I'll knock a load of stuff down. But there's a green bandana there with a
yeah,
with the emblem, which is sort of a crowned onion, because I guess it was what was produced in the region. But in the evenings, they have a big fire festival, and you've got not only drummers going through and dancers and people in costumes, but there's people with fireworks literally just shooting them into the ground, like these specialized sort of fireworks. And the sort
amazing.
of the tradition in the village is just to run around, just get yourself showered with sparks. And all of a sudden, while taking part in this, I realized that that one of the reasons they give those out for it is so you can cover your hair, because Becky's hair caught fire very briefly. And it's one of those things. And I just thought, I don't know if you could still do this sort of thing exactly like this in Britain, but I think we've got a little bit
Mm.
more red tape.
Amazing,
But
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, Catalonia is amazing for this stuff, isn't? Is it? I'm assuming that because Catalonia was both sides of the Spanish and French border, but I'm assuming that you're on the south side, are you? That's where
Yeah,
the
yeah. So it's about half an hour
yeah,
outside of Madrid.
yeah, right,
Not
got it.
Madrid, sorry, Barcelona.
Yeah, yeah, up the top of the top, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look, yeah, yeah. Actually, I might go and do something around that. I've got friends in the region, and also obviously, I know the Pyrenees really well from my time in France. They've got
Yeah.
some excellent. But I'm going. I'm actually going there in 3 or 4 weeks' time, down to the Pyrenees. And I went last year, and there was a demonstration of. Ah, hmm, can't remember its name. Where families stack each other
Oh
on
yeah,
top.
they do the pyramids. Yeah, the pyramid.
Yeah,
Yeah, the human
correct. Yeah.
pyramid thing. They did that as well. I got some footage. I thought, oh, I could use this for a Wyrd Wessex bit at some point,
Oh
but
yeah.
haven't done it
Yeah.
yet. But
Yeah, no, it's brilliant, and obviously still inside the Pyrenees on the French side, you've got La Fête de l'Ours, which is just brilliant. I mean, that is, I'll send you some images of that. That is just
yeah,
fantastic.
please do.
Yeah, you but the best. Let me tell you about this. It's brilliant. You see, you've got basically these days. Well, actually, it's built on a legend. So, some years ago, maybe 500, 600 years ago, a bear came down from the Pyrenees and came to this village called Prats de Molla la Prette and stole a virgin. Basically, that's the idea, and takes her back to his lair, back into the mountains. The chasseur, the hunters, go and track the bear down. They rescue the woman. They bring the bear back to the town in chains, and they put him in the middle of the town square, and they shave the bear and they humanize the bear essentially. And the bear over time becomes more and more human and becomes a sort of a handyman around town. He's got
Oh,
his
brilliant.
DIY skills and stuff. And I was like, are you sure that that's the legend? But that is the legend. And these days, what happens is they take three guys who play the bear and they blacken their faces with soot and oil and they wear black sheepskin and they start the church at the top of the mountain and beating their chests. Each one of them has seven hunters around them with like live rounds, firing guns into the air basically. And they run around the town basically, you know, chasing the women of the town, But it's all very quite theatrical. It's not dangerous. It's just more of there's more of a sort of a dance really, and
Yeah.
then they sort of smear the woman's face with soot and oil, and then at the end the whole thing ends up with the barbers coming down to shave the bear and put him back in his place, and he becomes a human and then walks off. And it's just mad. It's mad. Honestly, it's
That's
mad. It's
bonkers.
so surreal.
Yeah.
But brilliant spectacle.
Yeah.
Pyrenees.
Sorry, Craig. I promise to stop derailing us.
Why change what you always do? I mean,
This is true. This is true.
no. So to bring it back around, because obviously we do want to get and cover certain things on the Gathering series, because we do obviously want to encourage people to go and watch it as well, right? So one thing I was kind of particularly struck by was in the Horn Dance episode, there was the guy, and I'm only going to paraphrase what he said here, but he said, we must adapt and make changes, even if it means bending tradition, because holding on too tightly causes tradition to stop. We need to evolve while keeping the core essence of the practice alive.
Mm.
So with that in mind, Dave, was the primary goal of the series to be an archival record, or was it a desire more to promote and encourage people to actually participate in these things?
Um, I don't think it was either of those specifically, Craig. To be honest, it was more um, just hold a mirror up to what actually happens and make
Yeah.
authentic films so that others could, take a look and peer in, and hopefully come out of them a lot more informed, as opposed to them just being the weird thing at the end of the news. That was my
Yeah.
artistic
Yeah.
goal. I really wanted to make films which I could take back to the communities themselves, show them, and have them, feel that they were an authentic representation of what actually goes on. So I went
Mm.
back to three of the places to do screenings before launch,
Oh, nice.
with some trepidation, actually. Gone,
Yeah.
it's like this is what I think you guys do and your ancestors have done. It's quite a big thing, but
Yeah.
I was just really happy with the response, especially in Haxy and Rush Bearing and the like. And I've had, buy-in from all of the communities, which has been lovely. So I felt like my artistic goal in any case was achieved.
Yeah.
If that answers the question, that was my only aim, really. I'm not trying to tell people how to think about these things.
Mm.
I'm not telling them how to feel. I mean, they're quite sympathetic, aren't they?
Yeah.
To the subject matter, I think. But I feel that what they're not is an analysis of what folklore is today within contemporary society. You could make that film, but that's not what these are. They're just they're what are they? I don't know. They're a space for the custodians. Go and watch them. Go and watch them, and you'll certainly be a lot more informed than when you started out. Because I don't think this has really ever been done before. I don't want to
Mm.
try to dig myself up, but they tend to be treated in 3 to 5 minute reportage, or maybe a couple of
Yeah.
hundred words in journalists. So what are these things at the end of the day? Um, they're interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I covered one earlier this year, and I mean, I did do it in, I think, 10 or 15 minutes, to be fair. But it was the Ashmore Philly Lou. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Oh yeah, never been. Yeah, how was that?
That It was good, yeah. I mean, it had very much kind of village fete kind of feel to it. But they did actually end with the horn dance. It was quite dark at this point. I think it was about half 10, 11 o'clock at night before they actually did it. Um, but it was kind of the thing that struck me, I think, the most is like how they're all performing this ritual, if you like, but no one knows why it started or why they do it. They just do.
Mm.
I kind of like the idea that the Philly Lou is some great being that lives in the pond, and they're secretly appeasing this creature by doing this event, and nobody realizes that that's what they're doing. But that's the kind of folklore side of me coming out there.
And there's nothing wrong with that either. There's like I like my I really like my legends and myths too. But as a
Yeah,
documentary maker, I have to be if I'm not clear about what's real and what's myth and legend, then
yeah,
you can't make a documentary. That's not to say that the myths and legends aren't important. For instance, the example I've just given you, around
yeah.
the bear in Prats tomorrow, because the annual event wouldn't happen if it wasn't for the legend in the first place, right?
Mm.
So yeah, no, that's interesting. I'll have to come and have a look at that one. Yeah,
I
I'm
can't
not.
remember when. I think it's around June time that they do it. Maybe
Yeah, it's
mid-June.
close to the solstice.
That's what it is. They do it for the solstice, don't they? Yeah.
I
Um,
actually pulled the episode up last night to show Becky after watching the Horn Dance episode in
yeah.
Gatherings.
Mm.
There you go then. But yeah, I don't know. I just find it interesting, like that people continue to do them. I guess you've already kind of explained that it's more about the community coming together, isn't it? Than which I guess is the reason why they do it. You don't need any other reason or purpose.
I think there's a sense of place on top of that. It's ours.
Yeah.
Whether it belongs to Haxie or belongs to Sawbury Bridge, etc. And because it's special and very often unique, because each event is in and of itself is unique. You look at the Bury Man. There used to maybe three or four those kind of things,
Mm.
in Scotland. But the fact that it's survived is wonderful, really, and these things
Mm.
like Abbott's Bromley Horn Dance and the Buryman, they do engender a sense of wonder, don't they? Which goes way beyond, a guy physically walking around a community,
Yeah.
and I think that's fine. I think that's fine. And as a documentary maker, I'm sort of wanting to tap into that sense of wonder, and
Mm.
the kind of expressions on people's faces when they're at these events is like often, agog. That their jaws are open, and it's like, what is this part of who I am? What does this mean? What is this? It's
Mm.
from the past, but it's now. And it does make people wonder, and I think that's fine. I think, but having said that, there's probably a level where you have to go. All right, once you've got to understand the line between fantasy and folkloric tradition, I think, as
Mm.
a documentary maker at least. And then, what we haven't touched on, I suppose, is appropriation, because that happens quite a bit, whether that even sometimes political, but sometimes from belief systems and the like, and this is proof that this is that, and this is proof that this is that. And, I've seen so much of that over the years, and the problem with that is if you deliver that as fact and there's no documentary proof, then really you're just looking at examples of wanting to prove that you're right, yes, etc. So that to me is commentators. Again, we're back into
Yeah.
what does it mean to the people themselves?
But yeah, I think
Mm.
in the Berryman one, Doc Rowe, I think it was said that it's straight off the bat getting kind of angry about people making it a pre-Christian pagan thing when it wasn't necessarily a pre-Christian pagan thing, and like being very adamant on that because it is a living tradition, as we said, and how it's people are desperate to appropriate it, not just in that other ways, but to be that kind of pre-Christian. Oh, this has obviously got pagan roots. And I think it speaks to a pagan bit of our souls, maybe, but it's not quite the same. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
but
Sorry, go on. Yeah.
no, I was just going to say one of the other big takeaways from that was my partner, when she was watching it, said, "So are they in the costume the entire?" And I promised that I'd ask you this. Are they in the costume the entire time and don't get to pee?
That question came up when I did a screening a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, they don't really tend to. So he doesn't take much water on board, and he
Just
drinks
whiskey.
just whiskey all day. And then if it's hot, and it usually is, then
He sweats it back out again.
That's exactly what I said.
basically, yeah, he's just like works on the basis that he's going to be dehydrated for like
Wow.
12 hours, and yeah. But I've
So
got I've got shots of John Nichol coming off out of from under the mask at the end of the day, and he's just absolutely destroyed. He doesn't drink much whiskey. Didn't drink much whiskey. John Nichol, and Doc Rose footage, of course, is much earlier. And
Yeah.
there's a sort of I mean, it is sacrificial in a way, isn't it? So you're drinking that much whiskey,
Yeah.
unmeasured whiskies as well, and not always the best whiskey.
Well, and it was the one I like, the one where they had it set up outside in their front garden, sort of like a beach scene, and they gave him it with like a bendy straw. And it's really
Yeah,
out of place for drinking whiskey. But
I know. Yeah.
yeah.
um, I was after like 6 episodes. Could you talk us through sort of one event or sort of moment that particularly surprised you during filming, or perhaps one that was most sort of physically demanding to capture?
Mm. The second point first, then. Well, I mean, the in rush bearing, the rush cart, they pull it. I guess it's maybe 8 miles over the 2 days, something like that. Doesn't sound that long, does it? But it is if you fully, camera, tripod, and the whole shebang. And I was absolutely knackered by the end of it, to the point where I was really. But what I love about this stuff is that I come from editing and then went to filmmaking, right? So when you're editing, you think of every shot as a building block of a story, right? It's not just shot in itself. It's like, why do you need that shot? And when I'm out in the field, very often I'm not editing, obviously, but I'm preparing myself to edit. So I'm constantly thinking about the shots I'm going to need in order to build the sequences, which ultimately will end up, in the acts, which ultimately make up the documentary. So when I get it into my head that I've got to get that context shot, or I've got to get that shot of them coming down into the church in Worley, because without it, I've got no context shot to describe what goes on when I'm on the ground in Worley, then I've got no choice than to run a mile ahead of the rush car into a field, which was the only place high enough to get a vantage point of the rush cart coming along, and then down into Worley village, and having to work that out in sort of real time. So there's a physical side of things, and there's also a sort of mental side of things, which you're just constantly calculating all of the time, image, and obviously there's the technical aspects of camera as well. But I find it incredibly stimulating, and I really love it. And it's like a real time challenge, and I got pretty good at it back in the day when I was doing stuff when I was by myself, and I've just taken it on. There's another point there, I think, which is the reason that I go and by myself to these events is that you can build relationships with people in a way that you definitely couldn't if you start bringing a crew and vans and things like that, or trying to take them out of the context and sit them down and light things. So I don't know if that answers the question, Andy, but that was certainly the most challenging physical one.
It's interesting, I think, because like I never really considered it, but without having yourself or anybody do a narration over the thing to tell the story, everything has to be told in what you film. So you've got quite a big limitation there, because you can't think, oh, we'll explain that later. How?
That's exactly right. So many documentaries are sort of scripted, and then they'll go and find that they need to embellish the narrative, and then they'll lay them over the top and then put music, and that's the documentary. This relies purely on full sentences from protagonists. So, for example, when I'm interviewing, I have to ask the kinds of questions which solicit the right kinds of responses, which means full sentences and context. And so there's that aspect of what I do as well, and I feel like I've become quite skilled in working out how to prompt people. I do a lot of nodding and telling people that that's dead interesting without speaking, so that they'll just continue, because that makes it more conversational and more natural. And what I'm really trying to do, certainly in some of the sit-down interviews with the participants, is for their energy to come through the screen, because if they're not passionate about it, the audience won't be, obviously. There's a lot to think about.
Can I just ask as well? So because you're not in the documentary, but I think I spotted you in one of the episodes. Were you in the Jeff at Hand bar offering 40 quid for one of the? You were.
I was, because Billy Gillis is the. You've done well to spot me, because I've made sure.
You got your hand over your face, but it's only because we were preparing for this and I was on your website and I'd seen you already. So the first time I wouldn't have noticed, but the second time I knew what you looked like, and I was like, hang on, I'm pretty sure.
Wow. Eagle eye, excellent. You've done.
See, I did watch it.
That's proof. The goal is for my voice not to be in it and my image not to be in it, and because I feel like I failed a little bit if the question has to be in the documentary. But for that specific one, Billy Gillis, who obviously is the star, isn't he, of episode 4, Jeff at Bar. This is the guy that almost laid down in front of the council offices to make sure that this 300-year-old tradition continues. Over his dead body will it die, and he means it. Like, he really means it. There's a generation of men, I guess, that he was ex-army and all the rest of it, and he's such a lovely guy, though. He's just so interesting, and his passion definitely comes over. Anyway, he asked me to throw up his ball, which was obviously an honor. I couldn't say no, but it did put me on the wrong side of the camera, so well spotted.
I thought it might have been like a little sort of self-insert, a bit like sort of Peter Jackson, like stepping in front of the camera and eating the carrot in Lord of the Rings, just sort of like got to get yourself in there. Just a little Easter egg.
Yeah, wasn't
Mm.
Orson, didn't Orson Welles do it? Didn't he? Was he? I'm not comparing myself with Orson Welles, like,
Oh,
but
you can do that, sort of fill your boots.
Mm.
uh,
I think
yeah,
that's the other thing with the series as well, isn't it? Is kind of that community side of it, but then there's like the characters as well. Like you have some quite strong characters that come through in each episode.
I know, and that's not luck, by the way. That's working out who's best to tell the story. Because as
Yeah,
a documentary maker, you have to decide on screen time, where to allocate time, and to whom. So, for
yeah,
instance, Ian Dawes has got the best articulations of Haxy Hood going past, and because he's been a participant and lives and breathes it, clearly that was a no-brainer. It had to be him that explained the traditions, as opposed to a sort of outside folklorist or even or recognized expert. Um,
mm,
and then Billy Gill is the same for Jedburgh. So yeah, it's working out who's best to tell the story. And I guess from a editing perspective, the films themselves have a certain chronology. You start with before the event and obviously end with the event itself. But
yeah,
along that 30 minutes, obviously, we're looking for opportunities to naturally go and tell the history, or the folklore, or show some of the backstory along the way. And that was the challenge in the edit. But you do need a central, to your point, interviewee, someone that is the authority from inside the community. And it's usually usually the person that's most passionate about it continuing, obviously. So you've got the passion
mm.
as well.
So, after spending sort of so much time with these communities as you were making gatherings, um, is there anything that you'd say was the single most sort of important or striking thing you learnt about British culture or human nature, even while making the series?
Wow, that's a massive question. Well, first of all, I don't lump them all together. And what Gathering certainly isn't is a series about British identity or even a British story, really. I think it serves perhaps to show six individual
I was going to say
events.
it's more individual than that, isn't it? Rather than it's
Yeah,
not British culture, it is the culture of Jedburgh. It's culture of like these different places, I guess, isn't it?
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's way more regional by definition, and I didn't want to make it a film which draws lazy comparisons or extrapolates, or analyzes or is academic in any way. I want to make one film about each event and let the audience, do the maths, if you like. Um, but they're certainly more, it's certainly much more about regional identity than national identity. But I am drawn, I think, to warmth, actually, sort of human warmth, and how these things manifest sometimes that feel very generous to me. Nobody turns up for money, right? None of these things involve money, right? So nobody's there for any form of commercial gain, or they're there because it's something the community does. It's something they really enjoy, and off the back of that, there is something that's way more than the sum of its parts, I think. So I don't think I've learned anything other than hopefully what I've done is maybe shine a bit of a light on that stuff. And stuff. I don't want to be lectury, but probably quite important given where we're at. I think individualism, screen-based activity. Arguably we're sort of living in times which is more post-globalization, it starts to feel maybe regional identities are started to make a comeback, I don't know. That's just a hypothesis, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, folklore is trending, for sure. I feel like some of that's to do with the aesthetic of folklore and social media. I would just ask audiences to go a little bit deeper than the aesthetic and sort of
Yeah.
the lazy analysis and look at what's actually going on, because it's pretty warm, and quite healing, I think,
Yeah.
intergenerational outside.
Mm.
Obviously it involves beer and drinking, because it is Britain. They tend to be a lot of fun. I think if you look at it from that perspective, there's nothing not to like, is there? I mean,
That's
I
got all the
don't.
ingredients.
Yeah, it ticks a lot of boxes, doesn't it? Yeah. When I was doing the PR for this stuff, what I didn't see coming was BBC regional radio ran with it massively. I was on 13 different BBC regional radio outlets. From BBC Worcester to York to Leeds to Sussex, and they just passed me from one sort of radio program to the next, all live. And I was like, and then after the overall producer, who was based in London, said that this stuff's perfect for us because it links that sense of regional identity with discovery, And I
Mm.
thought, yeah, I see that. And it's got nothing to do with the national story, right? But everything to do with what goes on in your backyard, and
Mm.
that's quite nice in a way.
So yeah, I mean, what do you kind of hope people take away from the series gatherings? Um, and also, like, what would you hope your lasting legacy would be from documenting these kind of things?
Mm, wow. Well, I just feel that it would be nice for people to be a bit more informed as to what goes on in each of these events. That doesn't sound particularly ambitious, but I know that everybody comes with their own unconscious bias and prejudice,
Yeah,
and um, uh, it's not as if documentaries are going to change anybody's mind, but at least people will come out for the 30 minutes a lot more informed as to what goes on, as opposed to just go, you know, the Bury Man must be something to do with midsummer or folk horror or what have you. It's
yeah,
informative from that perspective. And again, back to what I said around the communities themselves having films which they themselves, enjoyed and felt were real. And I think, to ask you a question about legacy, it's not about my legacy, but I think the work will be pointed to in the future. I think Abbott's probably Horn Dance will probably be around in 2150, and the Bury Man might be there in 2266. I mean, it's endured so many
mm,
centuries so far. That you feel that it was quite a good time to document these things, especially with Doc Rose footage, because they're not immediate snapshots. They are, they're snapshots of a time over 40 years in some cases. Um,
yeah.
so hopefully, Craig will, that they will endure. The films themselves will endure in the same way as the events will.
You've kind of inspired me a little bit because there's a local event that I've been in this village for 6 years and I've not actually seen it yet. But it's the Pot and Mummers. So they
That's
still
Mama's
do,
Day. Yeah,
yeah. So they do a Mummers play. So I kind of,
Christmas.
yes, yes. So I need to find out kind of because I think they go around several pubs in the area doing it on Christmas Eve. So I think I need to go along and I might even try and document some of it. And
You absolutely should. Yeah, yeah. It'll
yeah,
it'll be old if it's a mama's play. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the thing about mummers plays is that people, you've got to stand and watch and listen,
mm,
because some of the English is quite old, and you've got to try and understand what's going on. But it is comes from the folk, you know, um,
yeah.
and it's the opposite of theatre in a way. It's not top
Mm.
down. it's this sort of like, and often, they'll make fun of, certainly characters and national characters and stuff, and it's usually comedy based. But yeah, it's like you've got to try and understand what's actually going on, whether it's Saint George or the clergy, or because most of these things are linked to authority figures of authority.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
take your camera along. Yeah, definitely.
We
Yeah.
spoke to Eileen Budd, a Scottish storyteller and folklorist, a while ago, and she did mention, we were chatting about it, how you've got, stories from the castle, stories from the church, then stories from like the inn, sort of the people. And I think Mama's plays definitely seem to be more of the stories from the people
Yeah.
in their sort of origins. And so you do, as you say, you get those kind of lambasting of authority figures, which I think's
Mm.
always worth doing. What's ahead? Can we expect a Gathering season 2? What have you got planned for the future?
I'm going to have a little break. I'm actually going to jump in my van in on Wednesday. I'm going to the Folklore Society uh, gig on Monday and Tuesday in London, and then I'm going to jump in the van, and I'm going to France. I'm taking the camera, but I'm going to have a little bit of a think as well. I'm going to end up in the Pyrenees, and
Nice.
yeah, I'm going to work it out. Yeah. Yeah, so watch this space. I mean,
Mm.
there's obviously scope to create a second series and a third and a fourth, probably, I've
Yeah.
got lovely archives, and there's a whole bunch of events which are useful. But there's also maybe the idea of contextualizing this stuff. There's things happening in folklore today which are quite new and quite progressive. I went down to Stroud on May the 1st to film with Boss Morris and the like, and I think there's things which are changing and feel new and very much of now. I think that's quite interesting, and maybe contextualizing some of that stuff. And then, I definitely want to do something again on France because I've got wonderful archives, and it's an amazing, I always think that Britain and France are the top of the Premiership with respect to folklore, and everywhere else is okay,
We'll take
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And then obviously Northumberland, which is where I'm from. I'm actually reading. What am I reading at the moment? I'm reading loads of stuff as usual, but on Northumberland folk tales by Malcolm Green. That's um, that's been an eye opener. Northumberland's really interesting, right? Least densely populated county, but with the most
Mm.
castles. The birth of Christianity for the British Isles. You've got all manner of invasions from to where Hadrian's Wall is. Romans, and then obviously you've got that sort of the time of Oswald and Cuthbert and Bede, and then you're into all the rest of it, the Norman invasions, and so it's left such depth of storytelling, and it's very linked to the land, and it's an extremely rural sort of place.
Mm.
So you guys should come up to Northumberland, and I'll show you around. It's a very interesting
Sounds
backdrop.
like a plan.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
we've talked about heading to the frozen north before to do certain things. I'd quite like to go to Lambton on the way up, like sort of they've got the Lambton worm and everything, which we've
Mm.
covered briefly. But yeah,
Maybe that's next year's road trip. We did a little Cornish road trip this just summer, just gone. So maybe next year we should look at going north instead.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, it's untapped as well. Northumberland is its only county I think I'm going to right in saying that has its own instrument. The Northumberland pipes.
Yeah.
I think if it was Scotland, that would be everywhere, wouldn't it? But we tend to hide our say we tend to hide our light under a bushel up in Northumberland. There's all sorts of things going on. Which
It'd be more like Yorkshire, sort of, wanting independence. Back to
yeah,
the old
well,
Saxon kingdoms.
yeah, well, Yorkshire is God's own county, isn't it? And I lived in York for 8 years. I've got a handle on that, and I do love Yorkshire, but Northumberland is
Mm.
very it's very different to that actually. And wonderful coastlines and really interesting sort of rural areas and ponds and lakes and fairies actually and
Do
worms,
like
which
a
are
bit of
dragons, by the way, and
yeah.
all sorts of interesting myths and legends.
Mm.
I mean, the worm side of it, I think that's a lot of that's the Norse influence because in a lot of the Norse mythology they were worms rather than your traditional winged dragons, weren't they?
Right. Well, you might know more than me about that, actually. I am reading the book at the moment, yeah. But I went out to Elston the other day, which is uh, quite an interesting. I have three horses' skulls, which they found in the belfry, back in the day, and it's like, okay, did they come from the Battle of Otterburn, or, what was their purpose, And it was like, okay, but we're talking about pretty, windswept. Um, I'm going to use the word bleak there, but the tourist board wouldn't thank me for it. But
Oh,
areas which
it's
are
evocative.
Yeah, it
yeah,
tells us everything we need to know. Let's go.
bleak in the frozen north. That's what we'll call the documentary. There you go.
I mean, is there? I guess you kind of we're talking about season two. Is there a particular event or a festival or even like a ritual that maybe not necessarily you want to document, but one that you really would like to experience?
Oh, that I haven't.
Hmm.
What?
I mean, I'd say anywhere, something you've
Oh,
always wanted to witness in person.
mm,
You can stick to Britain if you like, but if that narrows it down.
Ethiopian stick fighting.
yeah. Yes, probably it'd probably be outside. It would probably be further afield. Yeah, because there's something about the discovery of new, isn't there? I do feel like
Yeah.
it's. I judge my career on the number of out of body experiences I've had. So I'll be like when I'll be somewhere, and I'll be, for instance, in the Fête de l'Ours in the Pyrenees. It's like what is going on here? This is so surreal, and magical and also atmospheric and energy charged because usually it's around people and it's their day, right? So everyone's up, naturally really up. And when
Mm.
there's folklore and storytelling and practice around those things, then it's impossible not to be caught up in it, despite having to, set the aperture and remain objective and build relationships and carry tripods and do all the logistic stuff. But sometimes I've caught myself going, "What?" Felt really lucky as well, by the way. Just like, well, I actually get paid to do this. This is just
Mm.
this is too good. So it's not all I do. I make films for other institutions and like, but this certainly is my train. I call it my train. The train that I need to get back on. Um,
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, train to somewhere. I don't know where, but
that's the best way to be, I think.
yeah.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Season 2 of The Gathering is going to have human pyramids, Ethiopian stick fighting, and shaved bears that are good at DIY.
Yeah, and Mumma's plays in
Potton,
In
yeah.
Wiltshire.
Yeah, I
But
mean, if you ever want to come down to Potton, and say it's between Avebury and Stonehenge as well, so there's some interesting things to see around here.
mm,
So if you're ever down this way, give us a shout.
Mm.
Avebury, yeah. I mean, I remember I did fine art as a degree, and my dissertation was on Paul Nash actually, and yeah, he's got previous with respect to Avebury and talked a lot about his sense of place.
Yeah.
Should look back at that stuff. Yeah, great, brilliant, love it.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, I think that about wraps it up, doesn't it, Craig?
Yeah, I think we should let Dave get on with his Sunday.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, especially at sort of short notice. Yeah, really, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for, making the documentary as well. Um, yeah, have you got any, if you want to give any last plugs, any sort of little bit of information of where people can find you, find your work?
Yeah, of
Find the
course.
series.
Yeah, well, the series is on Apple or Amazon Prime or YouTube TV and movies. It's actually available in the UK, US, Australia, and Canada. So on Apple, it's in lush 4K, and that's just simply search for Gatherings. On Amazon Prime, again, search for Gatherings. If you can't find the links, just go to gatherings.tv, and all of the information you need is there, including the links. So yeah, please check it out, and then we'll have the funds to make series 2, will we not? But listen, I've really enjoyed chatting to you guys. I'm looking forward to coming up to Northumberland. Perhaps we'll do something up here.
That'd be
Yeah, that sounds
fantastic.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, is any particular gatherings going on that you think we should make it for? Then let us know, and maybe we can try and time it in there.
Yeah. I think it's more the stories, myths, and legends stuff. We've got a Shrovetide football match, which is really interesting up in Alnwick, and on the 1st of January, obviously, you've got tar barrels at um, um, and there's other bits and pieces, But I think
Do you know, I've literally just written a note in our thing that we need to cover the tar barrels at some point.
I've been meaning to for a while, actually. Yeah.
I put it in my notes document just yesterday. So it's funny you mentioned that one.
Well, there's Allendale on the 1st of January in Northumberland, but Ottery St Mary in Devon is the big one.
Yeah.
That's the poster child, which is fabulous, by the way. And it happens on the 5th of November. And I've got really lovely archives. If I did a series 2, to be honest, that would be a fairly obvious one. Yeah, it's wonderful. Really, really, really interesting, that one, and dangerous.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you once more, Dave, and thank you everyone for tuning in and watching or listening. Really appreciate it. Craig, want to do the socials?
Yeah, we're at Wyrd Wessex everywhere except for Instagram, where we are still at Wyrd_Wessex because we can't get the original name. Our website is wyrdwessex.co.uk. And yeah, you can, if you're listening to this, you can watch it on YouTube as well if you want to watch along. Or likewise, if you're watching and you want to listen on the move, then we're on all podcast apps.
So that about wraps it up. So until next time.
Stay weird.